There are places in this world where time holds its breath, where the walls remember, where the wind carries, not the sound of leaves, but of screams long extinguished. Tucked in a forgotten forest on the border between old Bohemia and the Saxon frontier lies Schloss Morgenstern, the castle of the morning star. A cruel name, perhaps, for a place where the sun has never once touched the stone. Built in 1391 by the excommunicated Duke Heinrich von Erlen, the castle was never meant to be lived in. Not truly. The blueprints were discovered, it is said, in a monastery scriptorium sealed with wax and iron nails. Not drawn by architects, but translated from visions whispered during a 10-day trance by a monk, who clawed out his own eyes before completing the final tower design. The stone used in its foundation, salvaged from pagan temples raised during the expansion of the Holy Roman Empire, temples that once hosted rites involving blood, mirrors, and the deliberate denial of death. Locals never settled nearby. It's not out of superstition, but out of instinct. Horses refused to draw carts past the moss-draped pines leading to its gates. Children grew feverish, merely glimpsing it from afar. And yet, like all monstrous things, it attracted admiration. From the decadent, the damned, the curious. The first to spend a night there was Agnieszka, a noble woman cast out for reasons, forgotten by history but remembered in whispers. A woman of great intellect and greater wrath. They say she entered the castle at dusk with a single candle and a white fox at her heels. At dawn, only the fox emerged, wet with sweat and trembling, as though from fever. Her body was never found. Over the next century, 12 others would try. Alchemists seeking secrets, barons seeking curses to cast upon rivals, even a priest sent by the Vatican to perform rites of purification. None returned. Not dead, not mad, simply ... erased. And then, in the spring of 1579, came the man who would not run. Sebastian Holt. He was not of noble blood, not even of clean blood, as his enemies liked to whisper. The bastard son of an English mercenary and a Moravian widow, Sebastian had served under 5 banners, killed under 3, and loved under none. But what he lacked in title, he made up for in precision. He was a mapmaker, a chronicler of ruins, a collector of impossible truths. And Sebastian had made a vow to spend a night in every structure cursed enough to be forgotten. A map he once wrote in the margin of his leather-bound travelogue is only honest if it contains the lies men buried. When Sebastian arrived at Schloss Morgenstern, it had been 36 years since anyone had set foot beyond its gates. He found no signs of entry, no footprints, no markings, only silence, and that peculiar sensation he later described as being watched by the walls themselves. He lit no torch, wanted to see the castle as it breathed, raw, untouched. His last letter, addressed to a colleague in Prague, read only, "I believe this place was designed not to keep things out, but to keep one thing in." The letter was delivered by a courier 2 weeks later, but Sebastian never returned. What we know of what happened that night does not come from him, not directly. It comes from the voice engraved on a cylinder of obsidian, sealed in wax, and hidden in the hollow of a withered oak near the gates. It begins with the words, "If you are hearing this, I no longer know if I am awake." The recording, if one can call it that, is not a voice, at least not as we understand it. It is hollow and echoing, like words scraped across frozen bone, yet within it lives Sebastian's cadence, the clipped rhythm of a man used to speaking plainly, now forced to describe the indescribable. "I passed through the main hall," he says, "and found no dust, no decay. Everything was too clean, as if someone or something prepared it for me." He describes the architecture as shifting, not metaphorically, literally. Corridors curved where once they were straight. Doors vanished after being opened. He stepped through a narrow staircase that led upward, only to find himself descending into the cellar. The angles betrayed him like a lie told so elegantly you begin to doubt the truth itself. "I hung a piece of linen on the wall behind me to track where I'd been," he recounts. It reappeared 2 rooms later, draped across the shoulders of a mannequin that had not been there before. The deeper Sebastian went, the more the castle seemed to unmake him, not by violence, not by madness, but by memory. He found a room lined with mirrors, none of which reflected his image. Instead, Each showed someone from his past. A mother with hollow eyes, a boy he once left bleeding on a battlefield, a woman who touched his face in a life he swore he never lived. Some wept, others watched in silence, but none blinked. It is in this moment, the moment of emotional fracture, that the story begins to darken into obsession. Sebastian, in his journal, reconstructed from half-charred fragments found in the ashes of his satchel, writes, "This place is not haunted by spirits, but by time. The castle remembers everything you've ever tried to forget, and it will not let you leave until you claim it as yours." He stopped sleeping, stopped eating. Not because there was no food, no. The dining hall was filled, each sunset with platters of rotting game and overripe fruit, laid out with fanatical care, as if mocking the idea of a feast.
But
He refused it, knowing intuitively that to eat would mean to belong. He returned often to the Red Room, a chamber painted not with pigment, but with the dried remains of something ancient. There, at the center, lay a bed, carved from black wood, shaped like a bier, and there a presence, not a figure, not a ghost, but the unbearable sensation that someone was watching you from inside your own body. Sebastian tried to leave on the third night. He found the gates open, the forest fogless. But when he stepped across the threshold, he woke in the Red Room, his boots muddy, his breath ragged, a small line of salt running down his cheeks, and something else. The words not yet scratched into his palm, as if by his own fingernail. The castle, it seemed, had decided he would stay. But he was not yet broken. One of the final entries of his travelogue, scrawled at a crooked angle and nearly illegible, Sebastian writes of a theory that Schloss Morgenstern is not a structure, but a ritual, a living sacrament built not to shelter men, but to feed on the collision between memory and guilt. It survives not by blood, but by identity, by slowly eroding the self until what remains is malleable, hollow, and what fills that hollow, no one knows. But he was beginning to feel it, a strange peace, a warmth, as if someone had forgiven him, loved him, and in that warmth, the coldest truth of all, he no longer wanted to leave. No one who speaks of Schloss Morgenstern mentions the fourth night, because those who reached it, if they existed, did not leave words behind. Only Sebastian did, and his words come slower now, like something pulled from a deep, unwilling place. "I believe," he whispers in the obsidian cylinder, "that I am no longer alone in this body." He had awoken that morning in the courtyard, though he did not recall falling asleep. The sky above him was not the sky of Bohemia. It was too dark, too still. The birds were frozen in the trees, as if time had paused mid-song. His breath no longer steamed in the air. The world had turned cold in a way that heat could not mend. The Red Room had changed. The bed was gone, replaced by a pool of black water that reflected only what you refused to see. Sebastian stood before it for hours. Or was it minutes? His own face flickered, not in the water, but inside his mind. Older, younger, then not his at all. A woman's face, a boy's, a creature's eyes without lids, teeth that formed a smile too wide, too loving. He laughed. Or rather, something inside him laughed through his throat. That was when the doors began to open on their own. Each room he passed through now contained objects from his past, but wrong. A compass that spun counter to gravity, painting of his childhood home, but with every window bricked shut. A letter he never wrote, addressed to a woman who never lived, signed in his hand with a name not his. Sebastian began to lose pronouns. I became we. Thoughts came in chorus, layered. He describes, with unsettling calm, a sensation like my spine remembering a posture I've never had. His walk became slower, more deliberate. He started tracing circles on the walls with his fingers, humming melodies in dead languages. And then the castle gave him a gift, a child. She stood in the central chamber, barefoot on cold stone, no more than 8 years old. Hair like river mud, eyes large and vacant. She did not speak. She simply held out her hand. Sebastian took it. They walked together through corridors that no longer had endings. The windows now showed scenes from other times, not visions, but intrusions. One showed a battlefield he'd once fought on, now overrun by silent figures in wedding gowns. Another revealed a classroom where children with stitched mouths stared forward as a nun bled from the eyes. The girl did not react, neither did he. In his final legible entry, Sebastian writes, "I believe I have been chosen not to survive this place, but to remain, as part of its memory, as fuel." The girl is not a guide, but a mirror, and I am beginning to like what I see. On what must have been the eve of the 5th night, he entered the chapel. It had not been there before. It never would be again. Inside was a single altar, and atop it, a mask, porcelain, featureless, except for a slit where the mouth should be. A voice came from the mask, though no lips moved. It spoke in a tongue that shook the walls. Yet Sebastian understood every word. "To forget is mercy, to surrender is grace. Do you consent?" He did not answer. He simply knelt. And in that kneeling, he ceased to be Sebastian Holt. Some believe his consciousness was devoured. Others claim he became the castle's new architect, that the rooms began to mimic his memories, and the castle continues to grow from within him. All we know is that the very next night, for the first time in centuries, the castle's windows glowed faintly with candlelight, and a second recording appeared at the gate. It bore only 4 words: "Now there is room." They found the second recording days later, nestled in a silver reliquary lined with human hair. Its voice was calm, to calm. The cadence no longer belonged to Sebastian Holt. It wasn't even quite human. There was a symmetry to the way it spoke, as though the words had been rehearsed 1,000 times by a mouth no longer tethered to a soul. "Now there is room," it said. Now the map breathes. Scholars, mystics, and charlatans all tried to decode it. Some believed it was a confession, that Sebastian had become part of the castle's design, not just its victim. Others argued it was a warning. The castle expands each time someone forgets who they are within its walls. But a few, the ones who understood madness best, claimed it was an invitation. You see, after that night, the castle changed. Its stone began to rot inward, not crumble, as though mourning. The gates, once sealed with rust and root, opened more easily. The surrounding forest no longer resisted footsteps. Travelers began reporting lights in the windows, shadows pacing the tower walkways, and a strange music that echoed only when no one was listening. And sometimes, the castle called them by name. A few returned to tell their tales. But what they told were not stories. They were dreams, symbols, half-memories spoken with a certainty that chilled the bone. One woman, pale and trembling, claimed she saw her dead brother sitting at a banquet beside herself. A second version, older, with her own face. Another man said he found a mirror that only showed him after he would die, and in that reflection, he was smiling. And one boy, barely 15, walked barefoot from the castle steps, eyes glazed, whispering, "It's not a curse, it's a reunion." Well, this tale, the one I've told you, is not theirs. Not even Sebastian Holt's anymore. It is yours. Because if you've listened this far, truly listened, then the map has already unfolded for you. You may feel it now. A quiet itch in your thoughts. A name you don't remember giving. A place you've never been to, but which your dreams have visited. Perhaps tonight you'll hear footsteps in the hall where none should be, or find a door that wasn't there yesterday. You'll ignore it at first, of course you will, but you'll look again. You'll open it. And you'll find it waiting. The room that remembers you long before you were born, with walls the color of dried roses, with a single mask upon the bed, a voice that says simply, "We've been expecting you." You may think you're stronger than Sebastian, smarter, less prone to weakness. But remember this. No one survives a night in Schloss Morgenstern, because the castle does not kill you, it simply waits for you to come home.